This is another episode of Hot Take Point, mate. If people don't know, obviously there's Keire. He plays the role of Maui Snake. If you don't know Counter-Strike, you know what these things mean. But then again, some people have watched League for 10 years and they just tell me like Fake is still the best or something. So I don't know if eyes and ears even work anymore. Zaboutine plays sort of the role of Kassad. If you notice, I also try to spark that dynamic as well, where I just try to like incite Zaboutine to shut down Keire and point out he's just a pleb fan, because that's also the dynamic we're playing with here. Also, quick shout out before we begin. I noticed Zaboutine made the classic mistake. It's how you know, even though in the French scene, you know, he's embedded. It's how you know in the international scene, he's still a bit naive, because he actually went into the YouTube comments. Don't ever do that, mate. It's a cesspit. He went in there and someone flamed him like, oh, this guy, do you mean the guy who was the Immortals coach? And then he just put something, which was a straight fire clapback. He did just say something like, yeah, and they've really been stacking trophies since I left. And was like, oh, fucking hell. Because they've left the LCS stars joke. So, okay. So I like that one. You're basically just Immortals catching strays there. Okay, fair enough.
I mean, it's I don't know what to say, but it's like, yeah, if, you know, it's like, oh yeah, he was really bad. And then after, like, there is a list of like 25 coaches that like all, you know, they won worlds and stuff. And it was really my fault. Yeah. So, you know, if I have a good comeback, I go on the comments, and I don't think the comments are as bad, you know, sometimes. I just ignore the one that like blatantly like stupid, but the ones that try to be engaging and I have a comeback, I'll go for it. It doesn't cost anything.
Yes, and if people don't know, already one hot take became not a hot take, it became reality, because indeed, 100 Thieves, that was the take on like episode 1, didn't make it, did they? Didn't make it through Worlds, so there we go, there's one. Put that on the scoreboard. Right, the question is though, let me see, since you got that one right, do you want to start with the first hot take today? Come on, let's see if you can go back to back. What hot takes have you got going on now? Also, by the way, we did identify on Summoning Insight, you're definitely playing the role of Kassad, because Kassad also sees himself as the reasonable one on the CS podcast, but he also, like you, will accidentally produce an even more insane hot take off the side of like a comment, and you go like, bro, what's going on with your notes? That should have been like the top one of the whole thing. So I want to see where you're going here. What you're starting with, because you always start reasonable, then you like go off someone else's take and go momentum. Come on, where you starting?
I don't have anything extremely spicy, because I was telling you, I feel like once the matches are happening, things are getting more objective, so it's harder to have like, you know, some imaginary take. I'm gonna go with someone that's very mild, but it's like 100 Thieves and Mav should have never participated in favor of JDG and KT. That would have saved time and tears to people online crying about their region. So we should have five slots for LPL and LCK in favor of a much better Swiss and tournament, and just get rid of like the two teams, because I think the carousel, you know, of every year, fans coming online saying, oh, our region is such a disgrace, we need to improve it, while like the seed 3 of, I mean, no shoot, like having 3 slots in regions where we can barely produce one good team is gonna like lose to other minor regions. So yeah, that's my first take, is like we should have 10 Asian teams from major regions, and then we can have split the rest of the available slots.
Here's what's funny. I had a similar take a while ago on shows and on Twitter, because what used to happen was Dom would always go, this is what's hilarious. One role I also played, so I used to do on desks in Counter-Strike, is I'm like the flak. If you don't know it, in a jet, when you fire that, think of Top Gun, when you fire that heat-seeking missile, the flak is where you release like a bunch of metal particles, and it goes into the air near you, and that can make the missile blow up there, and even though it'll blow up next to you, it won't blow your plane up, and potentially you can survive and go on. What I do is, by having my own outrageous takes, it means someone else can come in and have like just like a 7 out of 10 outrageous take, but that doesn't seem that crazy, because I said some mental shit, right? So basically, Dom was trying, I provide that strategy for him, because he'll come in and be like, I don't know if West should even get 3 slots, man. Maybe like, you know, shit, maybe it should be like 2, or so maybe they should battle for 1. And then I just come in and just go, Dom, if it was up to me, mate, like on Flashpoint, I would just go like this. It'd go, winner of each region that isn't LPL and LCK gets 1 slot. So Europe gets a slot, NA gets a slot. Then you have 2 or 3 other teams from NA and EU. They just go into a plains. And then if they can all come out of a plane, and by the way, I don't divide plains by region. Plains is just a fucking Royal Rumble. But whoever gets out of that could be GAM, could be PCS team. Whoever gets out of that, if it's Western teams, well, then you earned your spot. And by the way, the reason why that is still, like yours, a mega hot take, is because unfortunately it breaks the paradigm. This is why it is a hot take, clear or not? You don't think it is, Zaboutine, because to reasonable people, it's not. Like, we all have watched for years and years, and we all know that, like, there's times where there's been criminal ones where, like, Rookie on fucking IG or TES was, like, over in China, failing the regional, the last match. But then we all watched, like, you know, fucking Clutch Gaming go 0-6 or some shit like that. You know, those are the ones where it's just like, bro, it's not even debatable. Like, this isn't, I can't even make the amount. How can I know who's better, though? It's like, we already know, our eyes can tell us. But I can tell you, fans don't believe that. The cleverest thing Riot ever did was do that system, because I'm telling you, bro, I'm going to show people on videos soon. I still get comments to this day that are like, but how dare you just imply that the West can't be as good as LPL and LCK? For all you know, in a few years, they could even overtake and say, oh my God, we're off in reality. We're in Narnia now, mate. Like, this is not, reality doesn't tell us that. Like, that's why our system that we're saying now, I think it would be fairer, because in that scenario, like, you can basically have it where, like, other teams could qualify in, but you don't get the slot automatically. Because as I say, if anyone saw my video about unfair draws, the worst thing about the old pool system is it used to treat GAM and, like, AHQ as identical to, like, you know, like Rocks Tigers and, like, you know, and shit like that. Like insane ones where you had 8 teams. And so half of whether you made top 8 wasn't how well you played. It was like, blowing this... 6, yeah, I got like, and it's just what luck you got out of that pool too. That pool too determined everything. So, what do you think, Keire? Here's the thing. I don't think it's a hot take, but I think for fans it is. So I agree with the take, actually.
So basically, I'm actually someone who believes they're basically like I'm a slight more of a globalist. You know,
here we go.
That one.
Well, Scottish, of course. Okay, probably want your bloody independence too, don't you? Fucking right. Whatever. Come on.
I basically think. Basically, every single region should be able to send like one team, one team, but then the rest of it should all be playing. So like, I wouldn't even mind if Brazil got to send one team, Latin got to send one team, like fuck it, even Australia, because like at the end of the day, one of the pillars of Worlds is it's Worlds, right? Okay, but you can still keep the competitive integrity of it by having a very robust playing section. So I would allow a lot of national representation, but then I would have it be that everyone else gets there on merit. So I wouldn't care as long as there's like one of every other team, and then the next 12 best teams are 6 Chinese and 6 LPL teams. Like that wouldn't bother me. Like I think that is a better system than what we have right now, because that gives you, plus the global outreach of it being Worlds, League of Legends being the most global esport we've ever had. It brings in the viewership pool, you know, you keep a lot of people happy, you know. Again, I'm someone that comes from Dota. Like I'm an advocate for like the super groups where you play all the 2 massive groups and everyone plays each other. So you get the whole like spectrum of all the different play styles playing against each other, and you get to see like loads and loads and loads of like games before you go to like elimination, and you know all the teams will get to play. So I'm more of an advocate. So yeah, I agree with like Zaboutine. I actually like Worlds having like the representation and all like the fan like buy-in. I just don't like how cynical like Riot is with it in terms of like them treating like all these like teams. Like you would, even if you had like Brazil and like Latin and Australia going, you would never seed them as #1 teams, and that was the problem for like years, where like the seeding powers of the BO1 groups and now the seeding powers of like Swiss, where they just treat teams with equality when that really isn't like the case. The crazy thing is though, I'm 100% with like Thorin. If you watched it for years and you go back, and unfortunately I'm having to read more Reddit now, the fan sentiment for like things was like really, really like crazy. Like, but like the Riot were right and wrong. Like, for something I never knew until I spoke to like Peter Dunn was how much like Brazil cared about matching up against like Turkey. Like those two like regions have like their own like, where like Brazil would prefer to beat Turkey than they would like upset like a random NA team. Like them beating Turkey and outplacing Turkey at an event was like so much more like a bigger deal to them and stuff like that. So there's little like minor things like that can play out. And you kind of need to be careful because, like, you know, Riot's in front of, like, the orchestra and they've got, like, a lot of instruments to play and you don't want to just, like, crowd it out, like, completely. But I agree fundamentally, Zaboutine, like, fuck Europe and NA, like, getting all their allocated, like, slots. Like, I couldn't give a rat's arse about that. Like, just fill it up with the best teams. And if it happens to be NA and AU teams, like what happened in, like, Dota, if I don't know, like, Europe now dominates Dota and now Europe gets the most teams at TI because they qualify, like, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So yeah, I'm completely on board with that type of thing.
Because by the way, the obvious angle is, and this is where you think about this topic, it's when you're watching a game and you see like fucking Frescovi playing. I just think, Imagine being BDD sat at home on Twitch right now. You know what I mean? Like, really?
I was looking at the names, right, of the JDG and KT, and I just sit your bed, guys, right? It's like Flandre, Sheer, Knavi, Yagao, Ruler, Missing, Perfect, Pioshik, BDD, Deft, and Barrel. Is there any player that you wouldn't like? What do you say?
Maybe not full shit. Hold the horses.
Yeah, okay. No, but they're over. I mean, we can say about On, right? That like, oh boy, On is like playing terrible, right? There is always ups and downs, but wouldn't you like want to have these 10 players playing instead of, I don't know, like?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Right? It's like it's kind of terrible to see all these storylines happening at Worlds, and you're like, these guys are watching it home because they couldn't make it because they had to beat T1, and then in the meantime, because Adam was benched in winter split and G2 had a rough summer split, you suddenly see Frescovi and Mirin, which, I mean, good luck for rookies. I'd rather see rookies. I said it in the previous episode, but I still feel like in terms of raw level, this is the best tournament of the year we need to deal with, and we wait a whole year for that. I think it's a little bit of a disgrace eventually, years after years.
Okay, I've got one. Despite what Zaboutine said, I'm up to the challenge. I'm willing to take on a player still actively playing. So by the time this episode comes out, I could just look like a fool. It could all be wrong in the end. But this isn't actually one that's like that. It's one where it's going to be a historical one about a current player. So it's one where, but by the way, spoiler, a lot of my hot takes I'm just going to generate via LPL because I know people don't watch the LPL and they don't understand the history and the narratives of the players. So when I say this, it's going to fucking wreck people. Because if you don't know, one of the famous things about the Dade Award is there's a joke we have, which is we should have just called it the Clear Love Award because he used to come in hyped every year and then do nothing. It's actually just Chinese junglers because obviously Tian has also 2 times, I think, won the Dade Award. He had like the 2021 one where he fucked it in the groups, and then with TES the next year, he fucked it in the groups again, and he was a bit sus, right? But every year, so people don't know, here's the take, and it's spicy, but just listen to it because it's actually got basis to it. It's one of those, sadly, it's one of those ones that isn't just pure madness. The take is Tian, the jungler currently of TES, could actually have been the GOAT jungler, the best jungler to ever play League of Legends. And here's why. Because if you just look at his resume, bro, he's like missed more times than he's hit. So people don't know. Here's like the resume you would look at, the success. He is an MVP of the LPL. He was, in a different year, the finals MVP. He won Worlds, and he has won an LPL, right? That doesn't sound like much though, like a Worlds and LPL, like 2 MVP. Here's the difference though. He had something mental, like, let me see. I think there was 5 times he lost in the finals of the LPL. So that could be 6 LPL titles right there. Then you look, when he went to Worlds, the one he won in 2019, they weren't even the favourite. 2021, everyone said damn one in FPX. They failed. They were in the same group. He's a favourite for that one, bombed it in the groups. Last year, TES, it was supposed to be TES Gen G. So this guy could, for real, be sat on like an MVP, a finals MVP, a couple of Worlds, maybe even another one. He was a favourite every time he just bombed it. He could have something like 6 LPL titles. Like, bro, Andy did it in like 2 completely different, I mean, if you count this new lineup of top of eSports, like 3 completely different lineups, like not even vaguely similar with shared players or anything. Like, that would make him the GOAT. And then finally, the reason why I generated this take wasn't just that, because obviously there's other players came second a lot or didn't win and could have, like Rox Tigers players, you could say the same thing about them, right? But the reason why I made this take is because what has always tortured me about Tian is if you ever watch him, there clearly is, for real, like just some sort of choke factor to his game. He is not actually playing badly, as in he's not making bad decisions, like stupid decisions when he fails. He's one of those players where I read it as, he actually, I think, has a fucking unbelievable, like intuitive feel of the game as he is playing. He is that jungler that just does like the mystical path thing where he just senses where you should be and he goes to the next place. And if he guesses right, he's been doing it so far in the Swiss, it looks fucking sick. You're just like, bro, there's no way there was a VOD review where he like was told, like old school style, like they go to quadrant 3 after this time and you like look at the, he's not doing it, he's not, remember, it's not the old meta. He can't like track from the fucking jungle farm and use the trackers. None of that exists in the game anymore, guys. He's not doing that right now. For real, he just has a feel for where to be. And when he's on his game, this is why he's frustrating. When he's on his game, that's why he can be the MVP of the league. That's why he can be the all first team jungler, even when he's not in the best team, because he actually is fucking unbelievable. But at the same time, he definitely has the craziest choke I've ever seen. Like when that goes away, I've always said this, players who play off feel, well, obviously the main downside there, as opposed to being a player who plays off like rational logic, is the second your field deserts you, you have nothing. You're gonna do all the wrong moves. Even worse, you're gonna second guess yourself. You're gonna just lose everything that makes you you. And so I have to say, I just think if you look at his resume, everyone's going to go, look, the greatest jungler is like Canyon, or if they're old school fan, Diamond Frogs, or Dandy, or again, you go through these names, don't you? Bengi, these are the people want to put forward. Garza, Yankos, these are the names that have got the resume. If you actually look though, Tian, for real, like in a different world, this guy could have done it all, mate. With already the career he's had, he doesn't have to do another thing tomorrow if he did those things. Thoughts? Is it too hot to take?
Right.
What do you think?
Here's my I've got two problems with the Tian take. The first one, right, okay, is his awards are slightly fraudulent because they're Chinese awards. And when he won his awards, right, okay, there's this weird thing in China where if you're like already like a world champion and then you join other teams and you like win with those teams, you get more of like the points. It's a really weird thing. So for example, when he won MVP, he wasn't the best player on his team. Knight was. Like Knight was like absolutely hard carrying like every single game. Like Knight was destroying the league, like absolutely devastating. He was by far, he's literally a candidate for like the best player in the world. Never mind the best player, but Knight will get voted against in terms of like the MVPs when Tian's on his team, because Tian's a world champion. Notice how once he went onto BLG and he turned around BLG, even though he probably wasn't the MVP in spring, he gets to win it because he was on the JDG lineup and then he starts winning with BLG. So that's like the first one. I think some of Tian's votes. The World's Final one is actually like really legit. Him and like Doinby, I think everyone forgets how much upsetting like FPX was over like G2. As in like G2 looked destined to like win that, and that was almost like JJ overcoming Damwon with Canyon on it, where like a jungler that no one like considered the best, he actually overcame. And again, that was 2019 Yankos. That's like prime. Like if you were to take Yankos' best year ever, right, as a jungler, Tian beat him in like Worlds Finals, and he was a massive contributor to the collapse of like G2, and he definitely like peaked out there.
By the way, that's like, even I can tell you from the G2, but you probably saw an interview title like this recently. That's not when Caps and Yankos said that they like lose sleep and think about that match and what they could have done and what they should have done differently. What they mean by that, I'm being serious. I think they were the favourite. I actually think everything was they were support. It was the other series they weren't supposed to win. At that point, they were supposed to win that one. No one even fucking cared about FPX. They're the one that lost to like bloody J team in the group. So like no one thought they were going to win. No, and the real reason, and this is the big bomber, I can tell you if you are Caps and Perks, is the next year when they ran it back, they went, it's okay, we're going to do it differently, we'll get back there. They realised the next year, I can tell you this privately, they all realised there was the one chance, that was it, and that chance is gone. And we can still be great players, we can make it semis, we can fuck around and get an upset, but like, that was the one time where actually, because remember, famously, it was not only the style, it was that they had like, they would have all the flex picks in the draft. They were the worst time ever I've seen a Western team run the fucking draft against all the Asian teams, and the Asian team was like, bloody hell, what am I doing here? So like, they kind of know, unfortunately, that was the window, and that window was 1 year, and yeah, they probably should have won it, right?
Yeah, definitely. So here's the things that go against Tian as well. He's kind of got that peanut factor where he improves almost every team that he's on, but he oftentimes isn't the best player on those teams. So like for me on TES, Jackie Love and Knight were better than him. I think on this version of TES, I think Jackie Love and Mako were probably better than him, though I think his MVP maybe did deserve the MVP for the regular season, but including playoffs, like for the breadth of like play and MSI and stuff, I'm not all too sure. The other weird one against him is against his peerage and like the rest of the jungle peerage, he would be the only one I would put up there that he doesn't have like a distinct period. Maybe at what Worlds you could push it, where I think he was the best jungler at any time. Like I think Canyon spent time as the best jungler. I think Tarzan spent time as the best jungler, and I think Yankos spent time, and obviously Dandy, and then Score. They're the ones, and for me to put him in that group, I think if I was to put him up there, his time would be the shortest of like being like the best like jungler in the world. Like I can't actually think any time period where I would say, yeah, Tian's the best jungler at that specific time. And so that's where I would struggle putting him in the GOAT thing. He is like massively underrated though. Like for how many failures he's got.
It's because people just remember the two worlds fails, don't they? That's the problem.
Yes, he's got that prey thing where like he's underrated like relative to like his like peerage. And you actually look at his resume, it's like impossible for him to have been a bad player. Yes. There's that many teams over that many years with all that success. There's no way you can
remember. The there even used to be the narrative. Oh, he's just Doinby, isn't he? Bro, Doimby wasn't even there in all the top esports. He's not there now, is he?
Exactly.
Like, he's still playing without him now, so catch me Doimby. Yeah, I agree with you.
Right, I think he's one of the best of the in history, but I think it is where it's very hard to rate your take, and I'm gonna blame it on Riot Games. I feel like jungle as a whole over the years is a dog water skill expression role where you spend half of your time playing Jarvan or Sejuani, running to the winning lane, pressing Q under a turret, proccing aftershock, getting the dive, flashing out, and going back for fighting some Krugs in the jungle, right? And the rest of the time you spend your early games, just panning your camera up and down, trying to see if there is an opportunity. And you have these weird moments where some junglers have like this once every 20 games read on the enemy pathing, because there is a little bit of an information game and gambling when you play jungle versus jungle at a high level. And they have these like crazy read. The problem is like, it is very hard to gauge like the level of a player on these reads, because 99% of the time it's better to just go for the like play. And so if you look at like the track record of the best players in history, right, like the Kenyan, the Bengis and stuff, these are the guys that like even Karsa, they will always go for the like I would say theoretical play. And this is just the better play. Like League has never been a game where like trying to step away from the obvious play and trying to do something else pays off over many games, right? It's always better to go for the straight dive bots, invade the enemy jungle on Grom because your bot has prio, things like this, making it extremely hard to rate all these junglers that have like insane either like mechanics or intuition. Tian, I mean, we were speaking in the previous episode of like Bo and Milky Way. There is plenty of them. Like MLXG, for instance, was one of these guys that like will absolutely run the game down, and you're like, the game is over, and then like gank 6-time top and come back in the game. And that's bloody genius, because no jungle ever in history has made that. So I'd say, because the only way you can rate a jungle out of League of Legends, unfortunately, is, as Keire said, is like, oh, how teams have improved with him, right? It's like, it's clearly that with Peanut, with Tian, teams are just getting better because these guys are like find opportunities where there isn't, and sometimes the game is kind of locked. And I think Razork, for instance, Europe is the only guy that can do that. But unfortunately, the skill expression of the jungle is pretty much just play Maokai, press W on the guy and flash out after two turret shot, and then you're the best because the rest of your team is great. And I think it's just the game design is really, really shit when it comes to jungling, because there is only 3 camps per side of the map and there is not much to do. Whereas I think, for instance, in Dota, the map is much bigger, the jungle is much bigger, and so there is fights happening, 2v2, 3v3 at some points of the game where you can really see that the player playing the champion is a better player than his opponent. These things happens like twice a season, where you have like this Kindred Graves matchup, and the rest of the time it's just like Sejuani Maokai.
The other thing, he's the only person to pass the Doimby test. Because I've just went through it. Everyone else has failed. Bo failed the Doimby test. Swift failed the Doimby test. What do you call it? Who else was it as well? There was that other the other jungler that he had for like a period of the time. There we go. He failed the Doimby test. Yeah, like what do you call it?
Clid or something. He had a bunch of people.
Clid
was alright,
was a bit more Makino,
sure.
But Clid also wasn't as good with Doimby when he like played with him.
True.
Tian was like outstanding with and without Doimby. As in, like, I don't agree with him getting the MVP, but I can't say he wasn't an MVP candidate. Like, he was definitely in the conversation. Like, I'm just looking back on it now, and even separated from most callers, because you can't even say that Mako, right, as completely in control of like TES. Because if you actually look a lot of like the control factors on TES, a lot of them come from Tian. Like when he's on him famously learning how to play the Ivern and stuff, the Enchanter junglers, that made like a massive difference to that team. So yeah, he's actually got some sick, like his storyline and his arc's actually like really, really sick in context.
What is your take then, Keire?
Right, okay, so I do a show called EuroLeague, and on it, me and Rich dog, right, okay, dog on European GMs, right, okay, because they just don't seem to agree with the rest of us. They have exited reality, they have entered the orbit of Mars, and they are now speaking a separate language from the rest of them. But I've been thinking, I think LPL GMs are just as bad. I actually think the LPL might be one of the worst GM leagues, in comparison also to the resources they've had in the history of League of Legends. Because, and particularly this year, because not only, right, okay, is the LPL just like a complete mismanagement of like talent and like stars at times, but they've actually managed to almost make every single team that existed last year worse. Like, just categorically, it's just a worse version of what it was like last year. And like they had access to like the full like market of players, and basically everyone is worse off for it. So like JDG, like they more lost against the field, and they were just like strictly worse this way, and like a loads of like different dynamics. But again, you lost Knight. BLG upgraded, they're the exception, and I think TES were a little bit better. But if you actually look, I think Weibo Gaming are worse for losing Tarzan by like a lot. Them, would you call it? Sorry. LNG, sorry, are worse for losing Tarzan and getting Weiwei by like a lot. Even though they're like doing well, the other 75% of the year did happen, right? And they were way worse without them. I think Weibo Gaming look like they are better at beating teams that are worse than them, but don't have the same like upper kick that they used to. I understand that they beat like the LPL, like they went to the LPL like finals. But when they had like the Shy roster and stuff like that, them beating like the BLG like lineup was completely out of the question. Like that's like beating a team way better in the context of like era than what should be like possible. ADG shit show, RNG shit show, OMG is just like a complete talent barren now, where they had like all the previous generations of guys. Team World Elite is just not even a fixture like anymore. They're completely like kaboomed. NIP can't get enough players around Rookie, so he's just elo held yet again. Like that's just like continuing to happen. And then FPX haven't managed to recover from like the loss of like the Doinbeat era like team, even though they've now got like Milky Way, like the way his like contracts possibly structured, they could end up losing him at any point in time. So if you actually look at like the LPL, they've produced like 2 good teams this year. One of them slightly flawed, and one of them way worse than the team last year. But understandably, I think they've actually massively downgraded. And then across the whole year of play, I think this was one of the worst years, like for in terms of teams making from the LPL I've ever seen.
I would tend to agree that in general GMing is not really good across the board. I think there is a clear over the years lack of expertise from GMs of what it means to be a good League of Legends player and what it means to create synergy among players, right? And when I say across the board, I think that NA and EU, which are the ones we know the most, are clear examples. Like you see players traded. I mean, I remember the trade of like Advn versus Streamby. That for me, recent memory is one of the prime examples. I would not assume that like because people are living abroad, you know, suddenly you have people in GM positions that are watching, you know, solo queue and making decisions about players that are like very wise. I think it's much more of a from someone who had to go through the transfer market right, the off season. I think GMs are like the wallet kind of, you know. It's like this is the money we have, this is the result we want to have, and then there's a discussion happening, and then it spend their time, you know, discussing with other teams and other GMs. But I don't think there is like, I think the transfer market is very, very skewed, and it's very hard to operate it at in a good way. But I would agree with you that they're bad. I don't think they're any worse than the rest of the world. It's just if it's a shit show here, there is no reason for GMs to suddenly become like excellent scouts. And the only region that seems to have a good common sense is would be Korea. But if you look at, for instance, the past rosters of T1 with, you know, Cuz and Clid, and then they changed, and then they bench Faker, they did a 10-man team into eventually, you know, recruiting an owner and becoming the team that they were, but it wasn't any good. The Genji 2018 running it back after the World they won in 2017, that kind of crashed and burned at Worlds. You have plenty of examples of like jungle switches, player switches overall. The only kind of resource that's kind of clear to any GM is the mid laner, right? It's like good mid laner, good results. I'm gonna get good mid laner, and usually it works. But for all the supportive roles, like especially jungle support, I think there is a clear misunderstanding of like what GMs wants to do across the board in League of Legends. And I think that your point, I would say it's not that hard of a take, even though people think, oh, it's China, they must be great, right? It's a fan take. I think there is no there is not a single reason that why China would be better than EU, NA, or Korea in that regard.
Thing is, I actually think I agree with the take overall, because the thing I've never understood about the LPL is this is where, unfortunately, I think as Westerners, we can never see outside the water, and we are the fish that swim in the water of capitalism. We just assume everyone has similar capitalistic motivations to us, and that things should work off individualistic ideas like in the West. Like, for example, one thing that Westerners will never understand is that thing where they're just like, well, it's like sports. If this team's not good, just leave tomorrow and go to the rival. It's like, pro what? Like, you don't do that in like the LCK, for example. Like, think how rarely someone really goes from like KT to SKT or something like that. Like, sometimes people stay in these teams for years and years and years and years and years. And sometimes, like, you don't even think of leaving if you're the star. It's the other way around. If you're the star, you go, right, it's my job to stay and just play the best I can. And then they'll put people around me. You have a totally different perspective. And I have always thought the problem with the transfer market in the LPL is somehow there are players who play on the bad teams or on benches. Or, I mean, the example would be like Jun now. Like, there's a world where he'll just be like on the bench again for BLG next year or whatever, and they'll just like, he won't, even though essentially he's probably like a top 3 player in the league in jungle, like, he won't just go to a rival and be the star there and beat you. And so the problem I've always had is the amount of rosters that were even, by the way, world's favourites, that you look and there's one guy like, is this Among Us? I can see the imposter. It's Yu Yanjia. What the fuck? It's TBQ. Who the fuck's this guy? It's fuck. You can keep going down the list. It's Mark. Who the fuck? By the way, have you seen how many times Mark has been paired with like the best ADC in the LPL? Who the fuck is Mark? He is, not only is his name like literally a random person, he's the most average player to ever play support ever in the world. Like the best thing you can ever say about these people is fucking Baolan. It's like the best thing you can say for them is they sometimes just don't die and play like shit. That's it. They just sort of like they don't turn around in a shooting battle and just shoot their ADC in the kneecaps. When they don't do that, then that guy can carry. It's why, by the way, if Fnatic really had have beaten top esports in that 2020 quarterfinals, like everyone would have gone, oh, Reki and Hillsang. It's like, did you see what Jackie Love was fucking working with, my dude? Did you see what was on the other side of that? Like, that guy was just inting on like level 2. He was just walking into like a pike queue. Like, what are we? Have you never played the chat? This is at Worlds, bro. So I do think they have some utterly criminal fucking signings. Like you're saying, Keire, like, I'm not going to hate super hard, but if you're going to get rid of Tarzan, it better be because you've got Tian coming in, or maybe you're getting Jun. Is that the thing? Are we doing it? Is it a trade? No, it's just like, oh, we'll just bench him, and then again, we're going to get a guy where his job is just don't be Tarzan. Just don't do what Tarzan did wrong, and then, look, you won't be able to do what he did right, but just get out of the way and then see if the rest of them can carry. Whereas, meanwhile, you do look, especially in Korea, sometimes they can make super teams there. They can make some bonkers ones there. They can make them crazy ones. Like, all 5 are cracked. Like, what? Okay. Doesn't mean it works. But by the way, the GM's job, in my opinion, is not that the team has to work. Like, that's on coaching staff. That's on how players play. GM's job, for real. This is why, by the way, a GM in a fucked up way, unless he has the most amazing team that already has like god tier synergy, he probably should make upgrades every year, even if he wins. Because his job is get the best players and then give those tools to the coaches and the players themselves, the stars, and then they do the rest. Now, hopefully you have the synergy where the coach tells you, look, that player wouldn't work with this. But yeah, you can do all that. But I think you always should be just trying to get the best players. This is why you will get super teams made, because if they ever work, it would be the most cracked out team ever. So I agree with you, sort of. Though I also think...
How the fuck has Hang got...
Yeah, go on.
How the fuck has Hang got a job? Like, how's Hang still where he's at? Mark is literally on World Elite. Like, he literally went from being on TES and then continued to be allowed to play in the LPL. Like, why the fuck has FPX got Diakdom as an ADC? He was never going to make it. And he's an import. He's a fucking import. Like, what is that? Like,
there's
I can understand when they don't want... No, but there's too many players.
As well,
nah,
right?
That's also a cracked excuse because they've got the most ridiculous amount of players ever, Zaboutine. Because I watch LDL, mate, and it's an absolute joke, the amount of people that have to spend literal years of their life sitting in LDL, just like miring away because of like whatever like excuses it is. Like that, what's his name? EDG, Leave. Leave literally played, for context, Zaboutine, how many years was it? He played for 3 years in, what do you call it, the LDL, mate. 3 years. That's fucking crazy. And then when he came up, there was a conversation. Who's better, Pays or Leave? That was an actual conversation people were having. And look where Pays is right now. And Leave is just kind of like, oh, well, he's on ADG and that roster's fucked. Mate, it's crazy. It's actual... The region's bonkers, mate. They've lost their marbles.
I have a pretty decent take.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think BrokenBlade and Caps are top 3 currently at Worlds based on gameplay.
Based on gameplay, okay.
Right, based on gameplay, right, and how they played, right? Because I would say that for the mid lane position, I would say the first one is definitely Chovy. And I think there is an argument to say that despite Billy playing poorly, I think Knight has been playing absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think even Scouts and Caps are comparable in terms of level. I don't think Faker has really stood out. In the matchup between Hanwha and Zeka and Caps, I think that Caps produced way more gameplay overall, even though like his team was way behind. But I think that he was the only key for the game to actually last much longer. And if he was always like one play away of actually making it back for a team that was actually kind of griefing. And then outside of this discussion, I don't really clearly identify any mid laner that would be in the discussion, right? Maybe Cream. But I think Cream is much more limited by his champion pool. And I think that Caps is the only mid laner among the ones I've coded that can both play I would say, what I call the Yone Smolder meta, right? Because the meta is kind of 2 blocks. Either you play the Yone Smolder side, either you go into the Ahri, Nocturne, Orianna, like these 2v2 very, very like one-shotty combos, Ahri Vi, all these things that are going to probably expand because Yone is going to get even more banned throughout the competition. And then you have the 2 champions that always come back when mages and these combos are coming back, right? Which is Sylas and Akali, because they can withstand these bursty type of options, and Caps plays them too. So in terms of champion pool, skill expression, I think that Caps stands out in the discussion for being in top 3 at Worlds. And I would say the same for BB, that not only has very good showings in terms of movement around the map, I think his laning has been very, very good. His champion pool, I think, is one of the best top laner in the West when it comes to champion pool. But even if he was playing in a region such as Korea, I think that he's really picking champions outside of the, I would say, comfort zones of top laner across the board. So obviously the discussion is a little bit harder for BB because, you have Bean, you have Zeus and all these things. But I don't think Zeus has been playing amazing. I think that's the performance of BB, if you remove the nameplay, the solo kill on the Rumble of Brief, for instance, is clearly like, if Bean did that, everybody would say, oh, Bean is the best in the world. But because it's BB, we're going to kind of discount it. So overall, I would say that I think that the rest of G2 doesn't play like fantastic, but I think that BB and Caps are contenders for top 3 at the position.
So I'm a little bit less impressed because, right, I'm only going to say this in context. I've been saying all year, Zaboutine, that Galio is an absolute absurd piece of shit, and it should have been basically getting played like all year. Like, it's so broken. Considering Rumble Prial was absolutely broken all year, and then the minute like he gets that like counter pick, because in my opinion it's a counter pick with the Rumble nerfs, like I wasn't surprised with him. But people aren't going to like the fact that you're saying Westerners are better than one of the Asian players. The thing is, I actually think there's a better case for BB than there is Caps, because I think Zeka, Knight, and Chove are all better than Caps like right now. Like, I think Caps had that Young game, like he was playing well within it, but like that blunder in the top lane with like Mickey X was criminal. Like, if I done that, if that was an NA team, you would have told me that's like Abadage making that blunder. Like, oh, he gets really far in the game, and then they do this top lane, throw the entire game. Like, that was, like, he does play well, he dodges all those Ash arrows, but like that blunder is like utterly criminal. Like, it's so bad to have done that. Like, that's like Humanoid on Yone at like the Baron. Humanoid wins like the game, and then he goes to Baron and like dashes into 2 people and kills himself, and you're just like, yeah, this guy's like an imbecile. Like, what is that? Just Cap's done it 20 minutes later into the game. So I actually like think they're like close. I think they're doing a lot better than anyone expected versus the field. But I actually think like BB's higher just because the top lane pool's maybe worse. But I think he's maybe got like less actual like carry performances, and he's getting a lot of counter pick, Zaboutine. Like, he's getting the Poppy counter pick, and he's getting to do like the Galio like counter pick. Like, G2 are putting their eggs in the BB basket, and I can respect it. He's almost getting it over the line every single time. But he is like the focal point in terms of like, not focal point, but like he is getting like the draft resources to have like these like types of games.
Problem is, yeah, go on.
Go on. No, go on.
Problem is, in general, I'm a little bit biased against BrokenBlade because, first of all, I thought on TSM he got overhyped. Like, it was TSM. That was when there was no fucking good top laners in NA back then. Miss me with that. It was like Licorice. That was it. And then he was just like, he had one world. So that was it. So I always thought he was overhyped. Then also, actually, the part that impresses Zaboutine is the part that I find the most like sketchy about BrokenBlade, which is if you watch the LPL, there are literally like week after week where the best players, it's either first pick and ban or they just play it. They just pick like 2 mega carries and just shit on everyone in the league. If they get that carry, they build the whole cop around it and they just destroy the league. Right? BrokenBlade does that thing where it's like, I'm a master of all champions. I can play this one and this one. This isn't even a top lane champion. And it's like, can you actually just play the meta champions and win the game? And the answer usually is no. That's why he has to go like, is Rek'Sai even a top lane? Let's find out. He's like a rich man's fucking Merwin to some degree. He's just doing mad picks. And yeah, you know what? Sometimes you'll get the Whippo/Adam angle where it's like, actually, the other guy never has played this specific mental meta pick into your off pick. And if you can get him, especially in a BO1, it's obviously perfect. But you even get like a key game in a series, you know, where you can cook and you can do that, etc. I will say, when he tried doing that against Mad Lions, he's also one of the reasons Mad Lions is at this tournament, because that Fiora fucking pick or whatever it was, top lane in game 5. Like, please go back in time and delete that from the game. That was not a fucking pick. That was almost like win trading. At that point in time, please check BrokenBlade's PayPal after the game. That's just a joke, obviously. Now, that angle, with that said, he has played really well at this tournament. Like, he's had past internationals where I did think he was mad overrated. By the way, in some ways, he's sort of like 369 like that. They always come into Worlds hyped, and then at Worlds, it's usually just a bit like, nah, they're not as good as you think. They're like, what the fuck? I thought you were going to dumpster this guy or you go ham. Also, I will say at this Worlds, it has been less of the traditional G2, which was just like, let's play through Hans Sama and he's ahead. Oh, let's move him around the back. They haven't really done that, actually. They've tried to play like a different style, or they've tried to adapt to the current meta in some way. So, yeah, fair enough. I don't mind it. I don't know about top 3, though. I know what you mean. You mean just off performance so far, but like, I'll put it this way, spoiler. That take will get colder and colder. No, it will get hotter and hotter, and then it will just implode soon. Like, as more games happen, like in the next one, Zeus could just booty slap him 2 times. Then in the last series, when you're going to play against like fucking, you probably play like Weibo or something, or BLG, then you just get your heads kicked in then as well. And then you know what? That breather wasn't even been good so far. He'll just play a normal like Renekton game and just beat BrokenBlade on some weird fucking pick. By the way, if it's bin, he will actually get put in the bin. That would just be fucking trashed. So the take for now is not bad. It is a hot take. I'll give you that. It is a hot take. The idea anytime you see a Western player could be top 3 is a hot take. I also think the Caps one's a bit of a hot take, because I think you're doing that thing where it's like, you know how if you had a child, obviously, maybe this is not even true in French culture, but in America, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to tell them out, you go, you could be anything. You could be an astronaut. You could be the president. You could be Elon Musk and be the richest man in the world, even though it's just not plausible, because it's your child, and you've got to believe in them. You've got to have an imagination tree. You've got to see the best of them. It's why, by the way, when people are criminals, they're like, even a serial killer, they'll do that documentary and they have the old mom and she's like, oh, he was such a lovely little boy when he grew up. It's like, yeah, she still sees the best in him. She still sees her little darling bouncing on her knee. They don't believe that he could turn into that monster. So the problem is, everyone looks at Caps, and because you have to understand, Caps is the fucking Kwisatz Haderach of the West. He is the only chance we have of like some fucking Naruto shit where he could just secretly be the best all along, couldn't he? And even all, to the extent that we even shade in all of our own fucked up idiosyncrasies. Like in the West, we're not practicing as hard and we're not reviewing every fucking game. If you don't know, by the way, I heard a nightmare clip yesterday where Selfmade on LS's stream goes, I've never actually watched back a video of one of my games because I don't need to. I know in the moment when I make a mistake. It's like, brother, Faker watches back his games after. What are you talking? And you're Selfmade. You could say that if you were Yankos. You're self-made. Like, I think I know now why it didn't work out, bro. You know how sick your hands are? Yeah, the problem was between the ears, wasn't it? That was the fucking part. That was the part we needed to work on. So that's mad in itself. So I think everyone looks at Caps and they just see all the positives. The joke is, like that game against Hanwha Life, Caps can lose a game and they go, but he almost won it. And it's like, as my friend Moses, an American, says, almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So if you don't know, in the game of horseshoes, obviously it doesn't land right on the spike, it goes near it, doesn't it? And in hand grenades, if it goes near you, it still explodes. So shout out to Americans. That's about the only piece of wisdom they've given the world, aside from maybe do just fight a revolutionary war because of what happens if you just let them win. But that's our own wisdom. That's British wisdom. What am I talking about? Americans never figured that one out, did they?
You know, in French, the word for almost is the same as failing.
Oh, perfect! By the way, do you know what? I need to take that quote and I'll probably do like an article about Adam or something.
Because that's something I use a lot. It's like
that's set. That's set.
Because we use he failli, which is from the word faillir, which is fail in French, right? And so often we say it's like he was about to win, right? It's like he was close to winning, but the word we use to say close to winning is actually he was failing to win.
Oh, bro!
Because here's the thing.
Redeemed.
I don't think anymore that Caps does the craps games. He hasn't done that for a few years, actually. In the modern day, when they actually got rid of perks and those players, he's been very, very solid with his floor. But I also think he actually doesn't hit the heights as much as people want to believe. I think everyone in their mind, essentially, Caps is like a slightly overweight supermodel. You can still remember when he looked straight fire and he was a 10 out of 10. And you know what? If he just gets on the fucking treadmill and he just has a few less fucking, I'm joking, because of the time of the year, pumpkin spiced lattes, with the fucking biscotti on. If he just doesn't have that, if he just goes to the skimmed milk, he could be that supermodel again. He could have that tucked in cheeks, looking like Showmaker and fucking in this analogy night in fucking Trophy and just walking out like anorexic as fuck. Like, yeah, I think put anything on me, I'm like a fucking clothes hanger. So I think the problem is, I think the potential of Caps can be top 3, but I don't think he actually is top 3. Come on.
I just feel like he's still like I think he plays better than pretty much what he's done his whole career in the last year.
Yeah.
I think he's probably like at the peak of his level. The only thing is he's very comparable in terms of peak to like what Faker and Showmaker can do. The problem is the new 2 monsters that are at the top. That's why I say top 3. For me, they're not. Then I don't see a really like a set of humans being able to produce the peak level of Chovy or Knight whatsoever. Like when they play at their prime, it's just the one against the other.
It's absolutely impossible. Like
we've seen it at MSI, and even the gap between Chovy and Knight is pretty huge, right? It's like there is a guy at the top of the mountain that's just alone fighting against himself. But I'd say, depending on the meta and I feel like in this current meta, if I see a Zeka versus Caps and both play well, I would say it's slightly edge for Zeka, but based on performance. But as you said, I think this take is going to explode eventually.
Okay.
Or it becomes a banger.
All right, here's my next take, because think about this. This one's going to work. Like, not sad, it's for morons. Look, no T1 fans ever said this, but they wouldn't come up with this, and they would obviously agree. But it's the idea I'm giving this take. That's what makes it a hot take. So here's my hot take. I don't actually believe all that shit we all said last year. Like, I don't actually think that T1 solved the meta, or only they could play, like, those champions in the playoffs, and, like, everyone else suddenly had to play T1's game, and they've sort of, like, flipped the script on everyone, and everyone's rushing to, like, pick their picks and go for what they can. Because I think, actually, the game they played, the BO1 against BLG at this Worlds, is what's crystallized this narrative for me. Here's where I'm going to give Faker, and I don't know about Coma, he wasn't there last year, Keire, the people I think have influence on the draft, Faker especially, but Keire the way he plays and stuff. Here's where I'm going to give them mad props. I think what makes them unique in League of Legends is this. I think they are the team that understand the win conditions of their comp better than any other team. Now, first of all, they have played together for 2.5 years for most of this lineup. And then secondly, that's why I think it looks like, what the hell? These are the strong meta picks. No, it's the strong meta picks because they picked it. Because if you watch that BLG versus T1 game, their draft is fucking shit. Meanwhile, they have given, like, Keire probably fucking his table rose 2 inches when that fucking draft locked in and he saw the Jax and the Ari. And then the game started, and after 10 minutes of laning phase, he was like, bro, this is a fucking stomp. Like, this is over. This is an LPL game, by the way. This is a game. It's game over. You go next. You know what I mean? But what you saw in that game was, even though the draft probably was shit for all other teams, it's like T1 understood, though, exactly how to get the stupid fights with some of the champions they had. They knew when they could stay and do a fight 4v5, and it didn't make sense that they were doing it. Then you went to re-engage on it. Like, by the way, I didn't even think Faker was that sick on it, but he had like defensive pop blossoms all over. You know what I mean? Like, there was so many. Oh, that was Keire, sorry. There was so many fucking moves in the game where it's like every time in a normal LPL game, BLG wins that first fight, takes that dragon, gets that first kill, has a kill onto Knight. They would then just get the rest of the kills as well and dominate the whole game. And every time T1 was like waiting on the back foot with like the counter, with like the counter punch, with like the ult that was saved, or if you don't know in the 4v5 fight, if you ever go and look, BLG dumped like all their ults on like fucking Faker and like I think the bot lane or something stupid, and then basically as a result they could just immediately push back onto them. So like somehow not only their win con of the overall comp, they always seem to have a very strong sense. Look, what kills them is they sometimes can't get good enough comps because Faker is a champion poolish or Gumayushi can't play his area. That's what kills you, is when you can't get to the comp that you want. But once they have it, no, it's not only just from draft, it's like in the game, in the middle of the game. If I had to pause the game, which is the one thing we can't do in League, it's actually the real reason why fans are overly critical of even the best players, because we're all watching with a passive mind state where we're not engaging our mind to do all the moves of the game and check all the, we're watching and we're just thinking of things and comparing scenarios and what could have happened, and we're seeing with no fog of war, we're seeing all the health, we're seeing everything they aren't seeing in the moment because they're reacting. And like that thing that Dopa said, their information bandwidth is being used up by playing the game. Even pressing the buttons is fucking using it up. So I think if you were to pause the game, there are loads of players, by the way, could tell you, like if I ask Canyon, if I pause a game at like 17 minutes in an undecided game, an even game, he'll probably tell me who should win the game now and what they should do and how he'll get this dragon into, they can flip it into the Baron and then they'll take the top. But in the moment, he might not do that. I actually think the difference is Faker and T1 might be the only ones who already know that answer even without pressing pause button. They actually seem to, that's the sixth sense I have. It's not even just the whole clutch, because that's an umbrella, isn't it? Clutch, or they got aura. These are great fucking massive terms to never get to the bottom of what you're talking about. I think it's actually that they have the best sense of like, here's what you can do with that. It's why, by the way, to give you a Western example, it's why I don't care if they never make Poppy fucking meta ever again for support. Mickey X will continue to play it, I promise you, because his understanding of that kit and what he can do and when is fucking ridiculous. He would play that if it was nerfed, bro, because he can just do shit in the mid game and get that perfect shot off on the fucking carry that the others can't. They're not picking it for that. They're picking it for lane or to go and do a gank. So that's my hot take, that T1 is actually the team that seems to understand the win cons of their comp the best of anyone. Because I look instead at even Gen G sometimes pick someone and I'm like, what are you doing, bro? You could have just side laned and won this game. You know what I mean?
Can I double down on your take? Because I think it's a really good one, actually. I think it's a very educated take, to be honest. I think it's not even the T1 team. I think it's a Faker thing.
Okay.
Because I don't know, there is a narrative in France about Coma, that Coma was the greatest coach of all time, which I really find it weird that like us that who don't speak a single word of Korean can understand the work of Coma, but for another time. And they say, but his drafts were not great, right? Assuming that the coach is making the draft. Yeah. But if you look at the history of T1 drafting, and there is one common denominator, because they've been working with Zephyr, they've been working with Coach Kim, they've been working with Bengi, they've been working with, I think, Innovation, they've been working with
Paul,
Coma, back and
forth.
Loads
of people.
Right? It's like the list of the coaches, and they're all coaches that have won significantly with their own style, with different players, right? And you look at the different set of players that have worked around Faker. The single common denominator of T1 draft is everybody around the world looks at the draft and is like, this is a piece of shit, right? It's like, there's no pressure in the early game. Why are you playing Lulu and Lucian? I remember this Lulu-Lucian game from Beg and Wolf back in the days. It's like, that makes no sense. Why would you get these champions? They don't fight. If you actually fail any single thing in the game past 25 minutes, you have no damage whatsoever. And the game starts, and everything goes according to the plan of the audience. Everybody's like, yeah, this draft is shit. 22 minutes in. Bam, 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 bam. Ace. Baron goes to the base. Siege once, siege twice. Game's over. And you're like, what happened? No, but they cannot win with these drafts. It's just they had a good fight. And then my take that I've said a million times on stream, on my own stream in French, is like, either we're all right and we've been proven wrong about these drafts hundreds of times. Either there is one guy there that has played with any player in the world that every single time comes back is like, I think you should play Gnar here. And then at 25, just Gnar pushes 5 guys into the wall and they win the game. And I think Faker has an understanding of the game that nobody has even scratched the paint off in the world. That's a black box that seems to appear through, the performances of T1. That seems to be, for me, the strongest point of the player overall that I cannot explain. So I would really lean on your take, saying it's not even this T1, it's specifically a Faker thing.
It's actually why, if people know American football, there's so many weird, it's such a weird phenomenon because you'd think it's such an athletic sport. And if you play quarterback, for example, you have to scramble and not get tackled by people. But believe it or not, the quarterbacks are actually better when they're really old and they're not athletic and their arms all fucked, because that's when they become like the chess master and they just know what always the right throw is. And they don't go for the crazy one. They just go for like the right throw in each scenario and they win boring games in that sense. So I actually think it's like a factor. Like essentially that's what I always say in esports. It's why in Counter-Strike, if people don't know, the revolution is suddenly you have all these in-game leaders who are like 30 plus and they're the best. Well, the reason why is even though they're shit at the game, their hands are fucking appalling. Now, if you don't play Carrigan, like the worst highlights you'd ever see. He's not even shooting people in the head. But he is the best at making the call in the game and doing the read of what to do. Because what I always say is this, there's one factor in esports scales permanently: experience. Now, look, if your hands get too bad and you can't get anyone to play with you, and for example, say you lose your work ethic, then yeah, you're going to cap it. But if you do if you have half decent hands, Faker has them now, if you work really hard and you're in a good team, crucially, Faker needs other stars to make this work now, like Zeus, like Gumiusha, like Keire, in fact, all of them in their own way, then the experience does scale. And the difference is, right, I don't even think if you look, maybe that's actually the thing Monty's impressed with about Chovy, if you don't know. The story goes that actually maybe Peanut leaving and this year him having to take more shot calling, but it's made Chovy more of a cerebral player. He doesn't now just go, right, I have like 300 CS, now I go to side lane, then to Dragon, then we have a fight, did we end the game? No, back to side lane. Like now he himself's making like moves and like it seems like he's, but the point is, he's only started that now. Faker's the only guy I agree who's doing it the whole time. Like you can just see his game go like that. That part gets better over time. And if you notice, that's the part that no one's been able to catch up on. I'm with you on that one. I feel like the rest were just the best mid laner or whatever.
So here's the one thing. It does help that Faker was, in the early days, just the best player. And he could just override drafts by just being like a player like Deficit. People always obfuscate this. A massive part of why they win in Season 6 is he has Duke in top lane. I do not think he can win with almost any other player in that role. Like, at Worlds, it was so important that he specifically had Duke be able to play those Trundle Poppy and Echo matchups. Because in that meta, I have barely seen a top laner who understood a meta as well as that. As in, he was indomitable. Even like Smeb, who was the best player probably one of the best players all year, and the best top laner. In that specific meta, like, it was so hard for Smeb to beat Duke, because Duke was as skilled as Smeb, maybe even more skilled, and then on those matchups, it was unbelievable how good he was. Obviously, Faker was fucking unbelievable as well. To come back with these and to bring my own angle, like, Faker's basically entered like the Dota captain like full thing of like type of player where he has his style of the game. Everyone is going to like buy into his style. His chess pieces, right, are going to be like weapons designed like by him, and he is always going to like draft his style. And even if it's not meta or stuff like that, they're going to play their style because they fundamentally know it the best and they think it's the best way to win. The strength of that is you can like rotate the carries around the guy, and he can put like a bit of himself into everyone, and you can just keep the ball rolling. As long as you can keep bringing in people with hands and believe in you and buy into your style, and Korean hierarchy structure like just helps a million with this because Faker's just sitting at the fucking top beyond like lights of heaven, right? He'll be able to just continue the ever-evolving chain. The downside is when you lose that and then you have to yourself be the carry, you can end up be a bit fucked. They are like it's actually unbelievable how much like he is able to like transplant like his like playstyle into being effectual. Like when I was watching that game, like Thorin was saying, and I watched BLG walk into that Baron and T1 laid that vision trap where like a group of 3 of them were sitting off to the left. I was like, even though I couldn't see the play, I knew T1 was like there, like doing the setup. I was like, because this was just the iconic T1 Baron trap, and I was like, and then they clapped it and snapped, and I was like, mate, no, you could do, you just tip your hat, and you're like, we've been T1s, because that is why they're such like a dangerous team. When it was the scaling comps were just so strong, you couldn't override them. The team looked like shit. They didn't stand a chance versus HLA. They didn't stand a chance against Gen G. But now people have found a way to eat into scaling through a variety of different engage forms, either global and stuff. So they're like they're like playing the anti-meta right now, if you want to call it that. You know what I mean? They're like the counter meta. They're trying to like net deck if this was like a TCG. And yeah, like Faker has just hit that, and that is like one thing where I think a lot of people forget. If you've got like PCs like BLG, you know, you've got like Jun and like Wei, and they're like, you know, like choking or not playing as well. On BLG, you sometimes just don't have the experience or the winning experience to, you know, like calm those players down and like give them direction. The same way as like I've heard like loads of stories of like Keire was like panicking in game and asking millions of questions and non-stop talking, and it's like Faker provides the focus. You know what I mean? Like Faker's able to take Keire's like knowledge and insights and give the team direction off of those like plays, and that's invaluable. Like the ability to do that is like unbelievable, and it's where he's still got value now.
Is there one more?
Take.
Yeah, let's do one more.
One last.
You can do it one more each. Yeah.
Okay, so following on your take, Thorin, I think, and maybe it's more a fan hot take, but I think it would be very, very bad for the game if T1 win Worlds this year. For the esports of League of Legends, I think
you know what's sad?
And
put that as the headline editor, because everyone's going to think it's my take, isn't it? But it's not. And Zaboutine's even a Faker fan, so put that as the headline. It would be really bad for League of Legends, the game, if T1 wins Worlds.
Right, and I have to say, right, out of context, right, I'm wearing a T1 cap, right?
Yeah.
My partner has worked at T1.
Oh, okay.
So I've known a lot of people at the company. I really like the people. I like the player. I like the team. So I'm really not in any shape or form a hater of T1. But as an observer throughout the years of this game, I think that the problem is if you want an esports to be successful, and I think for you who works as well on Counter-Strike, right? Like you can understand the generational transfer that needs to happen in an esport for it to live long, right? I don't watch a lot of Counter-Strike, but for instance, it happened in Rocket League, so I kind of understand, right? We had the OG guys, and then the game evolved, and I think League is in a very weird time capsule where it's still the same guy in the same team that wins, despite best players emerging at different positions. And I think there was a summoning insight where you were mentioning like the narrative should be about Knight versus Chovy, right? Like the Knight versus Chovy should be kind of like the facing of like the LPL versus the LCK. And I feel like the last run of last year, right, was great for T1. It was kind of, you know, the icing on the cake. But there is this thing of if they keep winning, then these narratives will eventually disappear with the team, because I don't think this team is going to do a run back even if they do win. And then once this team is over or Faker retires, I think that it's going to just leave League of Legends in shambles if we don't have new faces that people can recognize and follow and get into the train of to actually keep watching and getting engaged by the next narratives, right? We thought it would be Damwon. Eventually, we had the emergence of, I would say, the Church of Knight and Church of Chovy. Maybe it's going to be another player. It can be Paze or something. But the fact that if T1, for instance, beats these Genji and these BLG that are already kind of the biggest powerhouses that you can imagine, then and this team disappears eventually, right? Okay, we're gonna have the Samsung White situation where everybody's gonna be like, oh, it was the best team of all time. It doesn't matter. It's like, then it's literally there's just crumbs on the table after the leave. Like, who do you want to root for? Suddenly you're a T1 fan, you're a Faker fan, and the only question you have is like, do you want like Chovy or do you want Knight? And people will be like, these people were worse than the T1 are like, I want my T1 and just gonna quit, you know, being engaged with the game. So I think for the global esports of League of Legends, T1 winning this year is too much. And I hope that the general transfer of fandom is gonna happen eventually.
Yeah, like, but I already hate, like, T1's already ruined fucking League history for me because their fans that just are cunts, right? It's unbelievable, and they're all liars as well. That's the other like problem, because they always claim to have watched the old shit, and like I've literally got the last comment on YouTube on the videos. You fucking morons! I can see the number not go up. I go check like every couple of years. Like I've got that stuff like on like lockdown, because I was finished having bad faith arguments. Fucking shitheads.
You're going back and checking out there's more views on the VOD. Hey, listen, in a way I admire the dedication, but you've taken being an anti-hater too far now. Like,
no,
even I
like,
mate, like what?
No, bro, no, mate. I'm not well, mate. Like, I straight up, like, because at the end of the day, right? okay?
Okay, you're basically like Batman. You're like you're beating up criminals, but you're a bit fucked up too. Okay, I see you're an anti-hero. Okay, right.
No, because the thing is, I actually like all the T1 teams, but they have a couple of things have ruined it. First of all, like Faker, the best individual player ever, also played during the era where individual play mattered the most, right? And then when you try and transplant the fact that like it is more of a team game, but yet Chovy and Knight are finding ways to carry. And it's not exactly the same, but almost like Faker, when it is so much more a team game, and then people just go, yeah, but era for era, they're not as good, and it's just like, mate, like, you've not even watched the era you're talking about, you're fucking lying, you're lying, we cunts, like, I can't handle it, so... They've already ruined like esports like history for me and like, people's ability to talk about things in terms of like equality. And if they, I'm not joking. T1 fans, you can at me on Twitter all you want, mate. I'll mold if they win this one. I genuinely will because like I'll actually just lose it. Not unhappy for Faker because you know what I mean. I've got nothing against like Faker, but like it'll be like so insane if they manage to like win in this like era. Like more kudos to them, but the fans will be insufferable. It'll be so insufferable. And I've not even got the TSM thing where I end up actually watching TSM and wanting them to win because a player I like ends up on them. I ended up just so anti-T1 in the reverse. Like I've mindfucked myself that like they have to fail at one point. And failing in LCK isn't even enough because people don't even care that happens. The only thing that matters to people's worlds now is it's just like, oh.
I also agree, and there's a few different reasons why. So one is I do think that's actually a very valid analogy. Like if you actually look, it's also not, here's the other, there's like a second part to it too, Zaboutine, which is as you say, you haven't properly been able to star build because Worlds is everything to fans. So the real problem is that's why the casual fan doesn't know that Chovy and Knight have been better than Faker for years. Because in their logic is that, yeah, but Faker almost won 2 Worlds with that. They didn't even make a final. And it's like, yeah, but that's everything except Worlds. They were the shit. They were just the best. And so the real problem you have is, because the same concept does happen, like as you say in Counter-Strike, if we still had the people from 2015 winning now, well, then you'd never have built Simple and Zemu and all these fucking godlike players now. Like, you needed them to come along and supplant them. But then here's the second part. You then need other people to have dynasties and eras. Like, it actually is kind of a low-key, even though I was a big JDG fan, it's kind of a bummer Down One didn't win that one. They would have had their dynasty of 2 Worlds and they'd won all those LCKs. By the way, if you looked at it, right, all these people could have won in these years when they were the best. If you'd have had it where, like, for example, in the era when Faker wasn't winning, what if that's when, like, Zhao Hu wins a couple of Worlds? That would have been fucking sick. Then there'd already be the LPL narrative. LPL wouldn't be considered the secondary region. Those 2 years, they were absolutely a team that could have won. Then you go and you look at people like the Showmaker one I said they could have won 2. Obviously, Chovy and Knight could have won like 2 or 3 or 4 in all these last years. If any of them does that, by the way, not only does it fix the history of League, because they're going to be playing for 3 or 4 more years and still be the best players. And as you say, someone who's a newer fan, or when Faker retires goes, I want to be a fan of the best, they just go and become the Chovy fan. Or if they're an LPL player, they become the Knight fan. You could even argue, by the way, one of these bloody Chinese mids winning for the LPL will be the best thing you can ever do for the League of Legends history. It's the biggest region. At the moment, you just have Koreans win. So it would actually be very big for Zhao Hu or Knight to have won it for the LPL. Then lastly, I'll also say this angle, which is, I also think the other reason why you needed people to win and have dynasties like that is because that would immediately fix the broken T1 narrative. Remember, when they made this 5-man lineup at the beginning of 2022, what they did was they won the first split really impressively. Then Gen G was better than them. And then they didn't win that Worlds. It's the one where they got bullshitted by DRX after DRX bullshitted everyone else on the other side of the group. Then last year, they weren't the best the entire year, and then they came alive at the very end and won, basically off that JDG series. That JDG series pretty much won the Worlds, mixed with Gen G lost to BLG, who lost to Weibo. It was one of those, you know, where you get weaker and weaker, a team wins the upset, but then you get so Weibo can be in the final. I mean, any of so if you go and look at it, this T1 team never was the best team of these 2 years, and they actually shouldn't, on paper, even have won these times. But because they had the chance to win 2 Worlds, and they did win one, and the other one was Game 5, to a fan, again, a casual fan, of course T1 was still on top. They're still the best. Whereas if instead someone else had won these Worlds and T1 was the same team, I'll give them the same credit. They always come top 3, top 4. Let's say they were that team. They make the semis and they play you in a Game 5, but then you lose. I'll tell you another thing. At the moment, unless something's really wrong, you don't 3-0 T1. It's going to be a hard-fought 4 games or a 5-game series. You're going to have an epic performance. That would also fix the whole narrative, because I don't think most of the T1 players have been the best players in the world. I think at times Keire was, maybe Zeus was last year at Worlds. Aside from that, Orna's never the best player in the world. Gamushi's never the best fucking ADC in the world. Faker's not the best mid laner in the world. If instead the narrative was, they're the team that, cause of what we said in the hot take about Faker, they can use like up and coming, really good, talented players with a mega experienced player to compete with the best team in the world. Like, they don't beat JDG. JDG wins worlds, but they competed with them. It took them 5 games. That would be a sick narrative for them, because I've always thought the second part of Faker's career was supposed to be like, I shouldn't even be at the top anymore. I shouldn't even be relevant anymore, but I can still hang with these guys as long as I do the smart move and then my team does the right thing around me. So it also ruined that narrative, because it made instead it look like if people really only care about worlds, it skewed their whole perspective. They don't understand League at that point in time. You got it. The winner of worlds, it gives you a really bad sense of actually how the season was, unfortunately, in League of Legends. It just doesn't work. I mean, the joke is, last year, Weibo was in the finals. They weren't even vaguely for 1 second the entire year a contender to win the LPL. And then in 2023, DRX won it. And they weren't even a team that could have ever made a final in the LCK. So I actually think World's winner, including when it's T1, can skew the narrative. I'm with you on that one. Right, let's do one more take.
Right.
Keire, let's
so
do it. Last take.
I've got one, because it's actually the father of the night agenda, and an LPL enthusiast, but also of the LCK. I think a lot of people are really missing this out here. BLG are playing against PSG in this best of 3, and everyone is talking like it's a complete whitewash. So let's go through this. First of all, the last time they played, it went to Game 5. Are we just memory hole in MSI? I'm not. Second of all, the bot lane's playing like shit. And I ain't talking about people shit. I'm talking about like streamy diarrhea down your leg shit. As in like Wayne On have done almost nothing good the entire time. Then their coach is literally falling asleep during draft, forgetting to ban stuff. Like straight up, like actually taking fucking Valium live on stage and be like, oh, there's a yawn in the game. Oh, how did that happen? Oh, I missed a ban. Oh, how did that happen? Fourth, and forget about just banning things, he's not even drafting well. He's picking Jin. For what? Why? You've got one of the best all-in ADCs probably behind Gala, and they're like, let's play a control mage ADC long-range utility. Or into what? Or Ultra Dive. Any protection for him? None. Like, I can't. Like, I absolutely can't. So you've got all of that, right? PSG are looking better strength to strength to strength. Their drafts are looking better each and every single time. And here's the thing, I'm not even saying PSG. I'm not even going that far. Well, I'll say PSG are definitely going to beat them. But I don't know, and I said this to Nymira, what right now, apart from individually, Knight and Bin are skull fucking people, right, are BLG good at? Because their objective setups are shit. Their mad early game was worse than Mad Lions. They literally failed a turret dive into Merwin, who is like the old man at the Spanish bar who's drunk as shit and like rocking in a wheelchair, smoking a massive Cuban cigar. Like, how? Like,
what a weirdly specific picture he painted there. You've been in Mallorca recently, so what the fuck is that from?
Just leave it, right? Okay, so...
Okay.
I can't get over how bad BLG are people. And people, the cope is, they'll get better, right?
Sure.
But if you've watched anything about BLG, their tendencies are who they are. They literally are like the culmination of the play. This is literally just BLG. It's all just backfiring them. And to top it all off, they might just sub in June and have like a completely different playstyle that might not even be good at this world. And they might just toin cost the entire game.
You know, it's funny how much like physical pain you have through watching this team.
I know,
like,
it's just the draft. I know.
You see the real fandom of someone who really want to see them at their peak level and see like, you know, it's like I support EU, so this pain is part of my day. You know, it's every single day. I think I had actually a take where I was saying that PSG would make worlds in any other region than LPL and NCK. So I think you know, I didn't have the time for it, but I think it's like, I think in EU and NA for sure, like they would make work every year. I think this team at least, they play really solid. I don't think like, I think it's normal to be upset as a fan. I think it's there is a lot of flaws to BLG, and they are definitely not the team that people sold me. I've been watching BLG the whole year, and there is a kind of a mismatch to me between the team that everybody tells me, they are like insane at the game. And what I see like locally when they play in LPL is like 5v5 at grubs at 7 minutes, over like 9 minutes. And then like 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 L gets a quadra kill on Lucian and then the game's over, or like Knight gets a triple kill because they have the early game comp and then they kind of snowball the game, and everybody's like, no, that you don't understand. Like, this is just a one-off. Like, they are very controlled. They have the macro. Like, you're gonna see it. So again, like, okay, game 2, and it's like first herald, like ace. I'm like, oh, okay, that seems to be the same pattern. It's like, no, they have great. So I've been doing my research on BLG. I've been watching the games. I've been watching the playoff. I would say the summer playoff were way more controlled than the spring, but it's still not like a team that's very controlled. I don't think they're like super brilliant strategically speaking.
Nope. You're right.
I think that, like, if you consider, like, I consider T1 in terms of strategy, position, synchronization, the best team, right? Even better than Genji to some extent. But I think that's what they shine through usually is individuals outplay and usually side lane pressure. I think that there is not a single chance that like PSG is able in a BO3. In a BO1, I would be on your end, but I think there is not a single chance that PSG loses in a BO3 because of the individual pressure they're gonna put. And I think that once PSG understands that, like, they're gonna get a lot of like very one-shot combo and they can kill Maple, and Maple is not playing, like, he's pretty off and on as a player, I think it's pretty easy to beat PSG. You just press, like, you do Vi Ari or Vi anything, you kill Maple, and then the rest of the team is not able to actually perform. And side lane, they're always gonna get the edge as long as they take the scaling matchup on PSG. So there is not a single world where I see BLG lose. For me, it's a W in my book, 100%. But I don't want to like discount your emotions towards BLG because I am on your side. I do not see the team that everybody has sold me the whole year. And I would say, and I don't know, maybe, you know, it's gonna be taken as like badly, but I think JDG just last year was the best team of LP in the last 2 years by like a landslide. I don't think this BLG is anywhere close to JDG I've seen last year on many like factors, but people sell it to me on the same level, and I feel like Genji, BLG were and JDG were very close last year. For me, like, Genji is just miles ahead of BLG, at least in this within these worlds and what I've seen from the summer split.
I definitely do agree on some of the factors. Like, for example, I think the LPL in general in history is just fucking garbage at drafting, mate, because I think that they draft with different ideas. And also, they do that thing, which, it's funny, everyone mocks them because they don't do, like, traditional Korean draft. But they do have their own weird global meta thinking that doesn't make sense for the personnel. Like you were saying that about some of those players. Mate, I can't handle it when top esports will be like, of course we're drafting Misfortune for Jackie Love. It's like, what? But he's Jackie Love though. Like, bro, look, I'm not going full Uzi eye. Like, I have to have fucking like Keire every game and just play through me. But like, it's Jackie Love. Like, wow, I don't want an immobile champion that can't do all the shit I want Jackie Love to do. Like, bro, in that scenario, you play the counters. You know, you play the Ezreal or some shit like that. You play something that can still go in. Like, it's Jackie Love. Why would I want him just stood still? Like, doesn't make sense. So that is in general how the LPL does it. They definitely do that in fucking BLG. They're still just stupid ass drafts that are like whatever. That's why the joke is, I even predicted this on Summoning Insight when I asked, I think it was Dagda, if anyone saw the episode. I said to Dagda, because he used to be an LPL guy, do you have any idea why it is that it can't, because it can't be the coach. It has to be Knight himself. Lets himself get drafted onto his weaknesses at every Worlds. Like, why does he do that? Like, every Worlds, he'll just be like, yeah, you could give me like a Silas and Arya. No, you know what? Give me Orianna or Azir. And it's like, why didn't he just go coach? Fuck that. Like, no, just give me my pick. Like, give me even enough Meta Syndra and Ari. I'll carry with the game. I'm Knight. Like, bro, I'm the bet. They let themselves go into that. So even the players have a weird sense for it. But I think one of the reasons why that you're getting down to here is, if you had to define in history, right, the problem Koreans had, it's actually why they struggled a little bit in Season 8 and Season 9, is they're overly sticking to the playbook and what you're supposed to do and what the correct move is. And they're essentially trying to min-max League of Legends. It's why, famously, my biggest pet peeve of Korean teams, even the best ones, is when they would do a team fight. This is mainly in LCK when they're fighting each other. They do a team fight, and if it's the LPL, you go, you know what, we're slightly behind in this team fight, but if I go super outplay on this guy here, we can win it back, and they're low health bars. Maybe I just kill them anyway. They will just go, actually, we're not going to look from the first kill. We're not going to win this fight. So everyone turn around, run away. We might even lose a guy as we're running out, and then we'll just leave them on low health bars. Like, they win that fight. They win like an LS fight where it's like 1 second in, they've won the fight. fight. Like, oh yeah, they have actually, so leave the game. LPL's the opposite. They're just like, actually, the fight's never won until the last guy's dead. And so the problem is, BLG are the ultimate avatars of that. If you don't know, it's why Monty's favourite team the whole time the last 2 years is LNG. Because if you don't know, I think Scout has that fucking Korean thing in him. He plays the most influential role. That's why LNG always plays a somewhat macro-based game, if you notice. They actually do play proper league. Whereas the LPL teams, like Knights teams, just play hands diff. Now, the joke is, as Zaboutine said, that's why I think JDG is accidentally the best team of all time. Because their skill was, when they're behind, are you ready? You know, if you're ahead, you'd probably want to take a team fight, wouldn't you? So you can end the game. But you know, if you're behind, what they do, Zaboutine, is they do this strategy called take a team fight and win the team fight. And then if that fight's close and it's still going on and the Baron's up, they go, you know what? I've got an idea here. Let's take a team fight at the Baron. And then they win that one and then they take the Baron and they end the game. And it's like, I'm not actually, listen, in a way, I'm sort of saying they wouldn't have been the greatest team of all time if Riot didn't make Fisher Price macro of the Baron and the fucking Dragon the way they are in the Soul. But because they did, that actually ended up being, I think, the best way ever to play. Because you couldn't put, if they were ahead, they won. If they were behind, well, they just won by team fighting. That is OP. Problem BLG has is they're the team that tries to win just by being ahead. They just try to front run and shit on you, and then they're not that good with the other factors. So I actually think their problem is they have mega hands, and they take those hands like that T1 game, and every time they get a kill, well, 1 kill, what's better than 1? 2. What's better than 2 kills? 3. What's better than 3? The ace. And it's like, no, that's not League of Legends though. Like, remember, it's not season 2. Bro, no one's even looking at kills as like a stat on the scoreboard. No one's like, hey, they're up 13 kills to 3. We look at the gold, we look at the comp, are you scaling? Do you need this objective? They don't give a fuck, mate. They're just going for the extra kill. It's mad. And so as a result, yeah, that's why I actually agree. Because here's the difference. I said this before. The reason why, even though everyone else flipped after Hanwell Life beat them like a fucking pleb, the reason I said the whole time Gen G's just going to win Worlds, and you know what? They'll probably even win and it'll be boring. It's because Gen G's the first team I've ever seen actually come close to looking like they've just solved League of Legends. They can just play the boring way because, spoiler, they have the most OP piece in the history of League of Legends, which is Chovy, a guy who somehow in 2024 can lane better than everyone else in the world. That doesn't even make sense. You would think laning would get closer the more history exists. If you don't know in Counter-Strike, what made people look better is we all watched all the demos of the other great players, and then we all see how they aim and then what they do next, and eventually we all learned like what their genius adaptation was. We all just learned that as a basic. Somehow Chovy can just win every lane, can always side lane against everyone. Now he can team fight. By the way, this year he added like, I just go balls deep on team fights. He added that part in too, where you do like the super player that wins the game or pulls a team fight out the fire. If you don't know, guys, back in the day, Chovy wasn't the team fight fucking mid laner. We even used to say he's a genius in lane, and then in team fights you rely on Viper or Deft or something like that. You don't rely on Chovy. Chovy's like one of the best team fighters too now. He even plays the Azir. Like, I actually think Gen G's low-key solved the game, and the problem is the LPL hasn't come close, and BLG shows they haven't come close. They haven't come close at all. I'm with you.
And all it takes is for Ben, right, and fucking Knight to be a nut hair worse than they are, right? And this team has nothing.
Oh, they'd be
this
wild,
team.
Yeah.
Like, this team literally is Ben must play as the best top player in the world, and Knight needs to be the best mid. Oh, did they do that? You might win a game. You might. And if they don't do that, you're fucked. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. Fuck BLG and all the coaching staff.